So
Okay.
let's hear a story.
Okay. Give me a starting point.
Tell me the story about when you went to Italy.
Italy. Okay. Okay. Um, right. I only went to Italy once, and it was to Rome.
Yeah.
And the reason for that was they were having, I think it was 3, maybe 4 days of training for the Italians.
Mm-hmm.
And so they were bringing us from all over to train them. There was a company that IBM had bought, and its name was Tivoli. And when people hear that, they think of the Tivoli fountain, which is famous in Rome. And it was part of a movie, Cary Grant and Audrey Hepburn or something like that. Anyway, there was a bunch of around that. But this company was called Tivoli. And they had their own buildings there. They were a big company, relatively speaking, had a bunch of products that we sold. And for some reason, they decided to bring us over and train their people on our products. Okay. So I went there, and I remember I flew in on purpose, and they let me do it. I flew in a couple of days early because, they're paying for the hotel, right? And so oftentimes they wouldn't let us do that. But this time they did. So I got to be there early and get over the jet lag and go see some of the sights and that sort of thing. And our hotel was out of town a ways. I want to say it was to the west of town, but I'm not real sure of the directions.
Mm-hmm.
But we're out of town a ways, and I was able to get a bus to downtown. They ran a bus back and forth as a shuttle for people in the hotel. And so I was able to go downtown, and funny to think of it now, they had this giant roundabout where it stopped. Like they pull up and they had a bus station there, but it was a giant roundabout with like 5 lanes going around it. Yeah, it was huge. And it stopped in front of this one government building, and it was kind of funny because the government building looked like it was something important and fancy. And people would stand out there and take photos of it, and then they find out, yeah, this is just, this is like the DMV. Mm-hmm. And so that was funny. And I also remember, I don't remember how many lanes were striped on the roundabout, but they had this massive square in the middle that was pretty. And then all these cars are coming around and going off this direction and that. And Italians, the white lines are just guidelines. They'd make, 6, 7, 8 lanes out of this thing all the time. They were always jockeying, and nobody was driving in their lane. And that's just the way they do. Just the way they are. Oh, yeah. So I landed at the airport and got off. I got off the plane, got my luggage and all of that at the airport. Mm-hmm. And there was a bus waiting to take me to the hotel. Mm-hmm. They had a shuttle back from that hotel back and forth from the airport. And so I got on that shuttle, and I had noticed walking through the airport, they had cops in the airport, Italian cops. Mm-hmm. They were dressed in full riot gear. They had, scabbard knives. They had fatigues that looked like army fatigues, and they were carrying AK-47s. Yeah. Very, very scary. Obviously, you come in and you go, okay, they're not tolerating nothing. They're not tolerating a single thing. These cops are serious, and they all looked like they were paramilitary, So and that was the cops. So I get on the bus, and I'm waiting for them to drive me to the hotel. And I'm watching out the window, nothing else to do, but watching out the window, and there's this red-headed woman. She had this flaming red hair. I don't know who she was or anything like that.
Mhm.
They were arresting her. Some of these cops were. And they're dragging her out to the car, and she was out of control. She was being wild and crazy and yelling at him and everything like that. And I remember they just subdued her and put her in the car. Not very nicely.
Mm.
And I went, okay, that tells me where I'm at. Be nice to the cops, right? So yeah, I was able to get to the hotel and then get jet lag over with and all of that. And then I was able to hop the shuttle and go back to the downtown. And if you walked off of that, you walked up a bunch of stairs and down a bunch of stairs, and boom, there you are in the Roman Forum, where they had the Senate, the original Roman Senate, and they had all the temples to Zeus and everybody like that. And you just walk this long walkway, and you could walk right up to these buildings and look at them. Some of them they had closed for repairs or whatever.
Yeah.
But you could stand right there and go, this is where they invented democracy, right? They were perfected it anyway. This is where Julius Caesar was and was assassinated. And it's just like unbelievable. And it was beautiful. And I got a bunch of pictures and whatnot. And walked up and down that a bunch of times. I went to a whole raft load of museums while I was there. But, and one time, I went way over to, they have the, they call it the Pantheon. Luna, come on. And that was a place where they originally had 12 gods, one station for each one. And if you wanted to pray to this god, you could go here, all inside a building.
Yeah.
And the building was round, and it was huge. And everybody kind of went in there, okay, cool. And then when Rome became Christian, they turned all those stations into stations for the saints. And so, yeah, okay, now I'm Catholic, now I'm going to go pray to this saint instead of praying to a god. And that was the only time I really got away from that downtown forum. A couple of times I walked quite a ways. One time I walked a long way. Oh, I went over to the Colosseum, and that was a hoof. I didn't want to trust the taxis. I didn't want to do any of that. So I limited myself to places I could walk to from where that bus stopped. And the Colosseum was a hoof, but it was close enough, and I got to see that. And they were in the middle of renovating that too. They were like building things everywhere. And so there you go, you want to go see it, and you think you're going to see the original, and it's like, no, they got boards and they got scaffolds and stuff like that up. But you're still standing there where, you remember the movie Gladiator with Russell Crowe? There you are. That's exactly the place where they did that sort of stuff. And that's very impressive and humbling and a lot of things like that, very emotional. I walked back from that and I got myself some early dinner, and the Europeans eat late. And if you go into a European restaurant, you have that booth for the evening. You get in there at 6:30, they don't expect you to leave until 10. It's totally different than it is here, where it's like, eat your stuff and get out and go somewhere else to talk. Totally different there. But it was great food. That was where I learned that I ordered something off the menu, and it was a 3-course meal. It was like, it was veggies, and it was a steak, and there was pasta. Well, they brought me the veggies, and I'm kind of going, okay. And I ate that, and then they brought me the steak. And I ate that, and then they brought me the pasta, and that's the way it worked. They waited for you to finish the one before you got the next one. It was kind of like, okay, bizarre, but okay. I got done with that, and it was reasonably early, but I knew I had to walk to get back. And I'm walking along, and I didn't have a good map of the city, and I was a little afraid to be walking with a map. He's a tourist. Let's go rolling,
Yeah.
right? And I'm by myself. I'm walking along, and a bunch of teenagers go walking past me, and they're chatting away in Italian. And I knew enough Italian from what I had looked up in the books and memorized to be able to ask them where I was going. And a kid says, "Yeah, you're going this way, and you're going to walk and walk and walk and walk." I went, "Okay, good. I'm on the right track, right?" And it's like not 5 minutes later that a car pulls up, and this woman with an American Southern accent, young woman, sticks her head out. "Hey, y'all know where blah, blah, blah is?" And I went, "No, sorry, lady. I'm a tourist here too, you know." But it was funny that I'm asking for directions, and then I'm getting asked for directions right away. I did get to a bunch of museums and saw all kinds of cool busts. I mean, every time they do anything in the dirt, anytime they have to fix a pipe or anything like that, they have to dig and they have to bring in the archaeologists. And they find busts of Caesar. They'll find a mound of them because, okay, that Caesar's dead. The new Caesar's on the throne. Let's collect up all the old statues of this guy and dump them. And so they'll find hundreds and hundreds of those things. It's like boring almost. Okay, here's a dozen different busts of Caesar that they found, and they got 100 of them in the back room at each museum. But it was still cool to see the coins and all of that other stuff. That was way neat. And we finished up our work, and the problem is that almost everything you want to go to overseas closes at like 5 o'clock. So we're teaching up until 4:30, and then it's going to close, right? The Vatican itself, some of the stuff in the Vatican closed at like 6 p.m. So if we hurried, we could get there. And I had a coworker who was Catholic, raised Catholic, but had lapsed when he was like 13 and skipped it. His dad was Indian, and his mother was the Catholic. And so when it came time to get confirmed and go through all that, he went, "Nah, I'm with my dad. This stuff is boring." And so I'm walking him around the Vatican explaining all this Catholic stuff as a Protestant. It was pretty funny. But we did get to go through. I went through there myself once on a Sunday, and I got to see them. They had a church service, but at the same time, the church service is way up there in the front of the building. That's where they're doing the church service. People are sitting, and it would look like a normal mass if you ever went to a mass. And then there's tourists everywhere walking around on the inside at the same time. And then over there is the confessional booths. And then over here is something else. And they've got the statues like carved by Michelangelo. They got a couple of statues in the Vatican. And you will walk right up to the barrier and see it. And the Japanese were walking everywhere with the cameras, click, 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 click on everything. And some of the people are just clearly tourists, and some of the people were having a religious experience being inside that building. One of the floors below that, they had the bodies of all of the popes in caskets and saints and other things like that. And there were people praying to where you couldn't make it hardly through the walkway because there were so many people nodding. And one of the popes who had died not that long before, there was a whole ton of people praying in front of his casket. And it's like Mother Teresa didn't have quite as many, but she had quite a few. So I got to walk all over the place and see all of that. They have a problem because they want to put up security cameras and the internet and stuff like that. Do you really want to drill a hole in a wall that's 1,000 years old? Yeah, it was tough. And they were clearly trying to figure out how in the world do we do that. But it was a beautiful experience. I was telling Brittany and Brenna, when they were here over lunch, the guys who guard the Pope for anything while he's there, they have a bunch of them. They're called the Swiss Guards, and they have to have a Swiss passport. They don't necessarily have to be Swiss by birth. They have to hold a passport there, and they wear these bright orange and black costumes. You look them up online, and they are really, they look like clown costumes. They really do. They look like clown costumes, but these guys all look like, I wouldn't hesitate to kick your butt, and it wouldn't bother me at all if you didn't survive. Every one of them was huge. The guys that I saw were all your height or above, and buff, and looked like they were in great shape. When I was in Athens, those guys didn't look like they were real soldiers. They looked like they were models. These guys, no, they are seriously soldiers, and disregard the costume and the funny pike staff. And I got a look at the pike staff, and it was sharp. You know, they got this long pole standing up here, and there's a blade on the end of it. It was functional. They could have taken you out with one of those if they needed to. But they also had cops. The Vatican has its own country, and it has its own cops. And they don't answer to the Italian police, and the Italian police don't answer to them. Totally separate. So one of the days we finally got done early, and I asked my buddy, he said he did want to go to the Vatican and mark that off for his mom. And so we hopped the bus once it finally came. Oh, Luna. We hopped the bus, we got down there, and walked around, and we went in, and the main thing was I zipped him through as much of the Vatican itself, and we had some time left, and we said, oh, the Sistine Chapel is going to close. Michelangelo's painting on the ceiling. The Sistine Chapel was there, and so you go in, and it's like you're going past the Vatican Museum, and they've got 3,000-year-old Egyptian artifacts over there, and you don't have time to go see them. And I thought, okay, I'll come back with Mom, and the two of us will do a more leisurely tour, but now I know the ropes of how to get from A to B and how to do it. That's always been how I did my trips, was I'll go and I'll stumble around and figure things out, and then I'll come back with Mom. And then we'll have a good time because I would know how to get around. So we zipped through there, got into the Sistine Chapel, and you're sitting there, you're looking up at the ceiling that Michelangelo painted, and they were always telling people to be quiet and shut up because some people wanted to have a religious experience. Others were just, wow, cool, this is art. And they had some massive guards in there as well. Keeping order, but also not trying to create a scene. I think they dragged a few people out that were just out of control. And this one guard, he had a couple of inches on you and quite a few pounds on you. He was a moose, and he grabbed somebody by the scruff of the neck and dragged him out the door and pitched him out. And they closed the silly thing, and there we are. They boot us out. 6 o'clock, get out. And we're standing out on the street. Okay, now what do we do? Well, 6 o'clock, dinner time, right? And I'm trying to go through my guidebook, figuring out where we are. Because it's a huge, huge compound. And we're off on some side street, and I'm trying to find where it is in the book and figure out what things are, figure out where a place to eat might be, and reading through the whole thing. And my buddy Eric sees one of the Vatican cops. Now, this is one of the serious guys with the whole riot gear and all of that standing there, and he was at least your size, at the very least, standing there on the Vatican property. And he says, well, hang on, I'll just go talk to the cop. And I'm thinking, it's been nice to know you, but I may never see you again. You're going to end up in jail just for talking to the cop. You never know, right? This guy might think you're a threat, might arrest you. Who knows what's going to happen here? So my buddy walks over to the cop as I'm still trying to thumb through the book and kind of going like this. And in English, he says, "Hi, is there any place to eat around here?" And the cop, in perfect English, says back, "Oh, sure. You go down this way a block and over this way a couple of blocks. There's a whole ton of cafes, and you'll be in good shape." And I thought, wow, you know. And he was absolutely right. We had a wonderful time at that cafe. They were upset that we left early, but we had to catch our bus. Yeah, they sat there. That was the place where we walked up, and this cafe says that it opened at 6:30, and it was like 6 at the time. So we grab a table, sitting outside on the street, and are chatting away. 6:30 comes, right? They ain't open. We're going, okay. I think almost 6:45 rolls around, and then they show up on a motorcycle. And it was a husband and wife. He went in and started cooking, and she started being the waitress. And they took marvelous care of us, but that's just kind of like, yeah, okay, it says 6:30, so what? And had a great meal, but then she got upset when we wanted to leave at like 8 or 8:30 after sitting there for a couple of hours, you know. And I had to try to explain to her in broken Italian that no, it was a marvelous meal, but we had to go. And that was the bulk of my time in Italy, was that sort of thing. I did a whole bunch of museum tours and things like that, and kind of saw all the artifacts. I saw as many sites as I could walk to. They have the place when you go up to the Forum and are going down, you go down, and if you turn around, they have the jail that St. Peter was jailed in before they crucified him upside down. So that was there, and I went into that, and that was almost pure tourist trap. But it's an honest to goodness old brick jail. They preserved it. Yeah, you go down this spiral staircase, and they say right there you'll see that the bricks are indented, and that's where they took Peter and smacked him against the wall. And it was a miracle happened that bricks indented for his face so it didn't break his face. And then you go all the way down to the bottom, and they got the place on the wall where they had the chains that would, you know, hold him out like this. They had the studs in the wall where the chains had been. So you could imagine a guy hanging there like this, like they show in the movies. That's exactly how they did it. And that was a horrible experience. And you're thinking, and I get to walk out. What would it have been like to be stuck here? But I'm trying to think if we did anything else. Oh, yeah. So when I went to the Pantheon, this huge circular building with all the gods around it and whatnot, that was in a ginormous town square. And so the building is over here and it's massive. And then you can walk all the way across, and then there's food and shops and stuff like that around part of it. And I went, got to use a bathroom here. And I asked around, and they said, oh, over there's a McDonald's. And that's the only public bathroom in the whole square.
Wow.
Yeah, unless you can sit down and buy a meal or something like that, and all the other restaurants were expensive. Unless you're going to sit down and buy a meal, then you can't use any of the restrooms. So I went, all right, I need to go. I've already eaten. I don't need a meal. So I went to that McDonald's. And you go in, and McDonald's in other countries are almost upscale restaurants, almost. They're like middle class kind of restaurants. And this one was one of those. But it had another spiral staircase to go down to the basement, and that's where the bathrooms were. So I go down that, and I go, oh, great, because there was like 40 women waiting in front of me, right? And you go, oh, great. So I stand in line behind the last one, and they go, oh, no, men's room over here. And there was no line for the men's room. these poor women were all waiting and waiting and waiting to get into the ladies' room, and it was segregated by gender for the bathrooms. And I can't think of anything else that's noteworthy while I was there. The Italian people were mostly really nice relative to some of the other Europeans, but they were treating any kind of incident with cops or especially terror. They were treating that real seriously at the time. And so it was kind of on high alert, but enjoyable country. Oh, yeah. They were having an election coming up, and a bunch of people were running for mayor and city council and government jobs.
Yeah.
And what they do over there is they have these posters that are so by so, and everybody uses the same size of poster. They don't peel them down when they're done with the election. They just plaster another one over top. I saw at least one place where they were like that thick, slapped on top of each other. And what really blew me away was Benito Mussolini, the dictator of Italy during World War II. His granddaughter was running for office. And so you see this poster, it says Mussolini on it, and you're going, I thought he was dead. Yeah, but it's his granddaughter, and she's running on his name. Do you really want to run on that name? Because they took him out and killed him for what he did to the country. And she did. She didn't win the election, but she ran on his name. And so you see him posters plastered all over the place. And there was graffiti on stuff. And one of the big deals was they were trying to make sure the kids didn't spray paint on something that was old. They didn't want them defacing any of the tourist stuff or any of the famous ruins or anything like that. They didn't want them doing that. And they were kind of worried about how to make that happen, but they had spray painted almost every other surface. You drive by a wall and it would almost automatically be spray painted. And yeah, but that was a good trip. It was an enjoyable trip, and I'd enjoy going back. Oh, I forgot to tell you the best story about that. So I was by myself on that Sunday, like right at the start, and I'm at the Vatican, and I go through and do all the touristy things, and I see all this stuff. I go down to the bottom and see the people praying, and the way that they had it arranged was all the cars and buses and whatnot could come into a giant area in the middle that was a round area. It wasn't a roundabout, but it was actually just kind of a round parking and stopping area. And it was huge, really, really wide. And so you pull into that, and then the Vatican is right in front of you. And it's actually a three-part building. So there's the church itself, St. Peter's Basilica, and then there's a wing over here that's like an educational wing where all the priests live who study and do all that sort of stuff. And then over here was where the Pope and those sorts of folks lived. So it was separated from this one. And at Christmas time, if you've ever seen the Pope on TV, they'll have him talking out the window and delivering an address to the people. That's where that one was. His apartments were on like the top floor, and it was one window that he could be out of and speak. So this Sunday I was there, and I walked around and done my thing. I'd missed him delivering mass, or he didn't always do it every week. And a lot of times he would be traveling, but he only delivered mass once in a while. And so that was true this case, but he always liked to go up and talk to the people from that window after the mass. And so there were people coming and going out of this central square, getting in and out of cars, doing all kinds of stuff, and going over to go see him. And they had an alleyway by that one educational building that was in to this giant central square, and that alleyway was barely wide enough for a Fiat. It was narrow because it's probably been there since people didn't have cars, right? And then the same sort of thing going out this way. Okay, so it turned out that the Sunday that I was there, they were having a celebration of the 20th anniversary of the making of the Ferrari. They'd made the very first Ferrari, and this was 20 years later. They were going to have a celebration. So they had 20 bright red Ferraris in that town square. You can walk up and go touch one, look at it. I don't know if they let you sit in it, but you could go see an honest-to-goodness Ferrari face-to-face, the latest model.
How did they get them down there with the?
They just drove them in. Really? I mean, it was they had drivers for all of those, and they just drove them in as a fleet and parked them in this one area. And the thing was, the area was so huge, they still had double-decker buses coming in and out around them, and people walking all over the place. It's a huge, huge square. And so there's people that are car enthusiasts there wanting to see that. And then there's people wanting to go see the Pope, right? Okay, so the Pope's up there and he's doing his thing, talking and singing and doing all kinds of stuff. And you got all of these people going over to catch a glimpse of him and catch part of what he's going to say. And so you got little bitty nuns from various countries. Some of them were just tiny. And they're going over, and some of them real old, and they're just kind of walking to go see the Pope. And then you got the young Catholic women that have this, tram of 5 kids that they're pushing, this baby carriage, baby stroller. And they're all going over to see the Pope, and they're just kind of at a mosey. Oh, yeah. So in Italy, if you hit somebody with your car, you pay their entire medical bill out of your pocket. Now, so that means that you drive pretty careful around pedestrians, right? But you're Italian, so what you do is you try to fake them out and make them jump out of the way so you can keep going. Because you're a hot-blooded Italian and you don't want to follow rules, but you know if you screw up that you're in a world of hurt, so you're ready to jam on the brakes, right? Okay, so you got that going on over here. And then all of a sudden, these Ferraris decide, okay, we're done. We're going on to the next place we're going to exhibit. And so they fire these things up. Brum, brum, brum. And they're sitting there. But their only way to get out was down this little alleyway where everybody's trying to cross to go see the Pope, right? So the very first guy, he takes off and he floors it. And he's smoking the tires. And he comes screaming up here. And here's this little nun walking over, some grandmother or something like that. She's walking over. She's going to go see the Pope. And she knows if he hits her, he's in a world of hurt, right? He might even lose his license. I don't know. It was a big deal. And so he comes screaming up to her and jams her to a stop. And he's sitting there, vroom, vroom, vroom. And she's just, I don't care, moseying across. And then finally she gets across and he goes, and peels out down the alleyway, right? 20 times they repeated that. I was dying. I was absolutely dying with laughter because it just kept happening over and over and over. This powerful, powerful car stopped by a little old lady walking across the street. It was hilarious. Absolutely a scream. Had a blast with that. And yeah, I think that's the bulk of my stories about Italy. So there you go.
Thank you.
Sure.